Oh my God. Did you just freaking hear that?
Josh Rocky heard that pump sound again down there.
Oh, did you see that?
What the fuck was that?
Ah, net als in die films. Ja.
Ja, hier.
Oh.
Loopt hij weer.
Hij ging er echt naar binnen. Hij trok hem op. Ja.
From prisons where inmates have been known to eat each other, to facilities so strict and ruthless inmates seek the death penalty to avoid living inside their walls, these are the top 10 terrifying prisons you should never enter or else. Sing Sing Correctional Facility in New York has been operating since 1826. The prison is well known, not just for how long it's been around, but for the notorious inmates who've been housed there in the past, names like Al Capone and Julius and Ethel Rosenberg. The facility sits on the banks of the Hudson River, and it makes for a pretty foreboding view. Another one of the darker things about Sing Sing is its history with capital punishment. The prison was home to an electric chair which was used until 1965. Over the years, a number of executions took place here, which definitely contributes to some of the legends that haunt the grounds. And just like with most American prisons, it has a violent reputation. With thousands of inmates over the years, conditions have been harsh. There's gang activity, fights, all the stuff you can look forward to if you happen to land yourself there. San Quentin State Prison in California is now called San Quentin Rehabilitation Center. It's a name most people have heard of. It was established in 1852, making it the oldest prison in the state, and it has quite the rep. San Quentin is especially notorious for its death row, which houses some of the most dangerous criminals in the United States. The prison has executed over 700 inmates, and 737 are currently sitting on death row. So the place has come up in discussions about capital punishment in America. Capital punishment is controversial, especially in the state of California though. The last inmate to die of lethal injection in California was in 2006 at San Quentin. The atmosphere at this prison is tense. It's housed some of the state's most hardened criminals, and inmates live under constant surveillance. This includes regular searches and strict routines, but even still, there's this ever-present threat of violence. Reports of inmate-on-inmate violence are common, and many staff members fear for their own safety as well. Aside from death row, San Quentin is known for some pretty infamous riots and escape attempts too, like the riot in 1971 that led to the deaths of several inmates and staff. Carandiru Penitentiary in Sao Paulo, Brazil was infamously one of the most violent prisons in the country. It opened in 1956, initially designed to hold around 3,000 inmates, but at one point it housed over 8,000. That's some severe overcrowding. There was a lack of sanitation, food shortages, and violence was all over the place. The prison was basically a powder keg waiting for a spark. And one of the most shocking events in Carandiru's history was the 1992 massacre. It began when a riot broke out in the prison and military police stormed the facility. In the aftermath, 111 inmates had been killed by police in what many considered an execution rather than a riot control operation. This crackdown brought international attention to the appalling conditions inside the prison, and after years of chaos and violence, Carandiru was officially closed in 2002. In fact, it wasn't just closed down, it was fully demolished, with only one block left intact to be used as a museum. La Santé Prison in Paris has earned a reputation as one of the most notorious prisons in Europe. It opened in 1867 and has housed a number of high-profile inmates, including political prisoners and infamous criminals. La Santé has been known for overcrowding, especially in the 20th century. Many inmates report living in cramped cells, sometimes sharing space meant for one person with multiple others. The facilities are old and in many cases deteriorating, sanitation issues are common, and the prison has faced criticism for inadequate medical care and mental health support for the inmates. This has made La Santé a breeding ground for violence. Over the years, nearly 40 inmates have taken their lives here. And a little piece of history for you, but the second last public execution in France took place outside this prison in 1939. A lot of inmates have attempted escaping from here, and a good number of these escape attempts have ended violently. In 1971, inmates Roger Bontemps and Claude Buffet took hostages during their escape, hostages that they ended up killing. The two inmates died by guillotine for their crimes. ADX Florence in Colorado is often referred to as the Florence Supermax, or the Alcatraz of the Rockies. The facility was designed to lock in some of the most dangerous criminals in the country. It opened in 1995 after 2 inmates housed in the United States Penitentiary Marion took the lives of 2 prison guards, and this happened just 3 hours apart. The guards' deaths were blamed on the poor prison design, and it was decided that a new facility had to be built for the most dangerous and uncontrollable inmates. ADX Florence is a high-security prison that houses inmates who pose extreme security risks and are deemed to have absolutely no concern for human life. The prison is known for its strict control and isolation methods. Inmates spend most of their time in their cells, which are essentially small concrete boxes with only a slit for a window. This is meant to prevent the inmates from knowing their exact location within the facility, which of course helps prevent any escape attempts and minimizes the interactions inmates have with each other. Anytime the inmates are out of their cells, it's usually reserved for exercise, but even that is done in isolated cages. Guards are heavily armed and every move is monitored by cameras. Any sign of defiance can lead to severe punishment. Next, we have Bangu Prison in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. This prison is infamous for its overcrowding and violence. Bangu opened in the early 1900s and has long been at the center of crime and corruption in the Brazilian penal system. The facility was originally built to house 1,500 inmates, but at times it's held more than triple that number, which makes for horrendous living conditions. The overcrowding has resulted in unsanitary environments and limited access to basic necessities like food and medical care. And it doesn't help that gangs control different sections of the prison. And when I say control, I mean like they control it. Prison guards are paid off by them. Not surprising that fights and riots are common. In 2004, a series of riots led to the deaths of over 30 inmates. It's clear that authorities just struggle to maintain order here. There's just too much corruption, far too much organized crime. Gitarama Prison in Rwanda is now called Muhanga Prison. Apparently, it's not as bad as it was, but it was pretty bad. And it's hard to find any definitive information on this because the government kind of downplays how bad things really are or were here. This facility was notorious for extreme overcrowding. And I've said that a lot on this list, but in this case, my God, it really is next level overcrowded. It was built to hold about 400 inmates apparently, but often housed over 7,000, leading to some of the most horrendous living situations imaginable. When you look at footage of this place, it's just nightmarish. Inmates would be crammed into small spaces with little to no ventilation. Many were forced to sleep on the bare floor on top of each other. There's virtually no sanitation, leading to disease outbreaks as well. And the lack of proper food was so bad that some were actually forced to eat the remains of dead inmates. That is about as horrific as it gets. Not only are you facing the challenge of surviving all the violence that comes in a prison and all the overcrowding, but the illness as well. Malnutrition, lack of medical attention has led to a significant number of preventable deaths at the prison. At one point, it was estimated that half a dozen or so prisoners were dying on a daily basis. Kwang Central Prison in Thailand is often referred to as the Bangkok Hilton, which is a sarcastic nickname. This is not a place you want to be. The prison has a reputation for being one of the toughest in the country. It was established to hold high-profile and dangerous criminals, but also houses a significant number of foreign inmates, many of whom are serving time for illicit substance offenses. Kwang is notorious for its brutal conditions. Overcrowding is a bit of an issue here, and inmates often live in cramped quarters with limited personal space. It also houses Thailand's main death row and execution chamber. The prison is known for its harsh discipline methods. If you step out of line, you can expect some pretty severe consequences, which can include solitary confinement or even physical punishment. And for the first 3 months of your sentence, you're required to wear leg irons. Death row inmates used to have theirs permanently welded on, but that hasn't been the case since 2013. Now, let's dive into the unsettling world of black jails in China. These facilities are not officially recognized as prisons. They operate outside any legal framework. Black jails are used primarily to detain petitioners seeking justice for grievances that have been ignored at the local level. Now, instead of being dealt with through formal legal channels though, these people find themselves abducted by security forces and held in these secretive makeshift facilities. black jails. The concept of black jails came about after the Chinese government abolished a previous detention system in 2003. Since then, these extra-legal centers have become a solution for authorities overwhelmed by the sheer number of people attempting to petition for their rights. Located in various types of buildings, from state-owned hotels to government offices, black jails can be found in major cities, particularly in Beijing. Human rights groups estimate there are between 7 and 50 of these facilities in operation, but it's hard to tell the exact number because of obvious reasons. Inside these jails, conditions are said to be absolutely horrifying. I mean, you can only imagine what goes on in a secret facility operating outside the law. There have been disturbing incidents involving SA in these facilities. In one case, a guard was sentenced to 8 years for his attack on a female petitioner. At least he did go to jail, though. The authorities employ interceptors, or black guards, to capture and transport petitioners back to their hometowns, stripping them of their possessions in the process. Despite numerous reports from human rights organizations, though, the Chinese government has consistently denied the existence of black jails. And finally, we have Black Dolphin Prison in Russia, often cited as one of the most brutal correctional facilities in the world. It houses some of the country's most dangerous criminals, including killers and serial offenders. The reputation of Black Dolphin is built on its extreme security measures and harsh treatment of its inmates. One of the first things you'll notice about Black Dolphin, if you're ever unlucky enough to go there, is its high-tech security. The prison is surrounded by thick walls and barbed wire, and it's equipped with watchtowers manned by guards with firearms. Inside, life for the inmates is grim. They're confined to tiny cells where they spend up to 23 hours a day. Each cell typically houses 2 inmates, but they're kept under strict rules that prevent them from interacting with one another. The isolation is meant to keep tensions low and minimize conflicts, but it can drive people to the brink of a madness. Daily routines are rigidly controlled, and the psychological strain must be incredibly intense. Inmates are required to maintain a low profile, following commands without question. Any sign of defiance can result in punishment, including solitary confinement or physical violence. Inmates can also be subjected to a practice called the crawl, where they move on their hands and knees while being monitored. The crawl is done to dehumanize the prisoners, to remind them of the power dynamic within the prison. And we're kicking off the list with Bodmin Jail in Cornwall, England. This formidable structure was erected in 1779 and served as a functioning prison for over 150 years, closing in 1927. Throughout its operation, the jail was the site of countless punishments and prisoners being put to death. The belief that the place is haunted is due to the grim conditions and traumatic events that occurred within its walls. Over the years, the prison housed inmates enduring overcrowding, harsh labor, and inhumane treatment. One of the most well-known spirits believed to haunt Bodmin Jail is that of Selina Wadge, a young woman convicted of infanticide in the 19th century. It's said that her tormented spirit wanders through the prison, and visitors and paranormal investigators reported hearing her cries and witnessing apparitions resembling her. The jail's chapel, where prisoners' unalivings took place, is another hotspot for paranormal activity. Visitors have reported unexplained voices and an overwhelming sense of doom while inside of the area. Number 9, Kwang Central Prison. Situated in the outskirts of Bangkok, Thailand, this place is still operational, notorious for its harsh conditions. Even though some particularly brutal practices have been banned, the facility was constructed to incarcerate extremely dangerous criminals, and a significant portion of them are on death row. One of the prison's infamous practices involves chaining inmates to leg irons during their first 3 months of their sentence. For those on death row, these leg irons are permanently welded onto them. Often referred to as Big Tiger, Kwang Central Prison lives up to its nickname as locals describe how it engulfs its inmates in a seemingly relentless cycle of suffering, almost like a death factory. The conditions inside the prison are harsh, with overcrowded cells, limited access to medical care, and inadequate sanitation. Inmates are often subjected to extreme heat and substandard food quality, and while some improvements have again been made to address these concerns, the prison remains a place to avoid at all costs. The psychological toll of confinement, the presence of death row, the severe living conditions, it just makes this prison a place you dread spending even a single hour in, let alone a night. Strongly advised you steer clear of this prison if you value your well-being, and if you've committed any crimes in Bangkok. Next on the list we have Holmesburg Prison. Holmesburg Prison, infamously known as the Terror Dome, became notorious for being the site of a number of highly unethical scientific experiments conducted on its inmates. These experiments were so inhumane that it's difficult to believe that stuff like this actually took place. This is like something you'd see in a Blumhouse movie. These experiments were overseen by Dr. Albert Kligman, a dermatologist who is basically a real-life mad scientist. Inmates, often driven by desperation and the promise of earning a meager sum of money, volunteered to be subjects in these experiments. Dr. Kligman subjected them to a wide range of horrifying stuff like exposure to microwave radiation, infection with various skin diseases, and biochemical experiments involving substances like dioxin, which was used in Agent Orange during the Vietnam War. Dr. Kligman was quoted describing how he felt the first time he arrived at the prison, and in his words, "All I saw before me were acres of skin. It was like a farmer seeing a fertile field for the first time." The conditions at Holmesburg Prison were horrific, to say the least, and the experiments conducted within its walls were a clear violation of very basic ethical standards. Number 7, La Sabaneta Prison. La Sabaneta Prison in Zulia, Venezuela earned a notorious reputation for its extreme levels of corruption and just deplorable conditions. Within its walls, reports of extortion and rampant violence were disturbingly common. The prison was effectively under the control of various gangs and criminal organizations, essentially operated by inmates themselves. Inmates within the prison often found themselves coerced into paying protection fees to these groups merely to secure access to basic necessities like food and water. Corruption ran rampant throughout the prison, with both guards and officials often accepting bribes to turn a blind eye to the activities of the prisoners. The inhumane conditions at this prison prompted outrage from human rights organizations and the United Nations, leading to widespread calls for its closure, and the prison's environment was so poor that visiting it would have been strongly discouraged. In response to this escalating crisis and massive riot in which over 50 individuals lost their lives back in 2013, the Venezuelan government finally announced plans to shut down the prison. Inmates were transferred to alternative places, marking the end of an era of unimaginable suffering and brutality. Next up is Shepton Mallet. Shepton Mallet Prison in Somerset, England is renowned as one of the world's most haunted prisons. Its construction finished up in 1910, and it remained in active operation until 1990, changing ownership multiple times during its existence. At one point it served as a military prison under both British and American control during World War II, before reverting to British authority afterward. Once again, the prison is believed to hold the lingering spirits of past inmates who endured unimaginable suffering within it, where numerous executions by hanging occurred. The prison's haunting history and the countless lives that were affected by its harsh conditions make it a pretty foreboding and unsettling place for sure. In at our number 5 spot is the West Virginia Penitentiary. Established in 1866, the prison operated for over a century before finally closing its doors in 1995. During its long history, the penitentiary saw tons of unalivings of prisoners, both by hanging and later by electric chair. Inmates also endured overcrowding, unsanitary conditions, and brutal treatment, leading to numerous grievances. And the prison saw a number of riots, escape attempts, and inmate violence was happening on a constant basis. One of the most famous ghostly residents is believed to be that of R.D. Wall, an inmate who lost his life during a 1929 prison riot. Visitors and paranormal investigators have reported hearing unexplained footsteps, disembodied voices, and sightings of a shadowy figure roaming the premises. The infamous Sugar Shack, a building used for solitary confinement and corporal punishment, is said to be particularly active with paranormal paranormal phenomena. And number 4, we have the Ohio State Reformatory in Mansfield, Ohio. Built between 1886 and 1910, this ominous building served as a prison for over a century until its closure in 1990. The prison was designed to rehabilitate young offenders, but its harsh conditions, overcrowding, and reports of violence gave it a dark reputation. Over the years, numerous prisoners endured the harsh conditions of the prison. Some met their end there. The prison saw its share of deaths, including those resulting from disease, accidents, and violence. One of the most famous reported hauntings at the prison involves the ghostly presence of the former warden and his wife, Helen. Visitors have claimed to experience encounters with these spirits, particularly in the warden's former office. They describe smelling Helen's perfume, and some have reported hearing ghostly voices, as if the spirits of the warden and his wife continue to linger, arguing from beyond the grave. These reported encounters have made Ohio State Reformatory a popular destination for paranormal enthusiasts and ghost hunters, but if you value a good night's sleep free from specters and spooks, just hit up a hotel instead. Knowing Ohio, though, it would probably be haunted too, or plagued by some weird cryptid. Next on the list is Maxwell Street Police Station. The Maxwell Street Police Station in Chicago, built in 1888 as a response to rising violence and crime in the neighborhood, has a dark history that has led it to being known as one of the most haunted places in the state. Over time, the police force meant to protect the community became infamous for their own brutality, and horrifying stories started to emerge regarding the treatment of inmates housed in the station's cells, particularly in the basement. Inmates at the Maxwell Street Police Station endured nightmarish torture at the hands of officers, often for the amusement of those in charge. And as these horrifying stories started getting around on the street, the station earned a bad reputation, being given several unsettling nicknames: the Old Red Fortress, Bloody Maxwell, and the wickedest police district in the world, to name just a few. Many visitors and paranormal enthusiasts have reported these eerie encounters within the station, especially in the basement, where inmates were subject to their torment. Unexplained sounds, voices, and sensations have been described, leading some to believe that these restless spirits of the prisoners continue to haunt the building. Number 2, the Tower of London. One of the most famous haunted locations in the world. Founded in 1066 by William the Conqueror, it has served various purposes throughout the years: a royal residence, a fortress, and a prison. The tower's reputation as a place of imprisonment and execution, particularly during the Tudor period, is what leads many to believe that the place is just brimming with ghosts. One of the most famous ghosts said to roam the tower is that of Anne Boleyn, the second wife of King Henry. Anne Boleyn was infamously unalived within the tower's walls in 1536, accused of adultery and treason. Her ghost is often reported near the site of her death, with visitors claiming to have seen her headless apparition wandering the grounds. Another ghostly resident is Lady Jane Grey, the tragic 9 Days Queen who was held captive at the tower and ultimately lost her life in 1554. Her spirit is believed to haunt the tower's corridors, and sightings describe a semi-translucent figure dressed in white, mourning her untimely fate. And the tower also holds the legends of the ghostly White Lady, believed to be the spirit of Arbella Stuart, a cousin of King James I. Arbella was imprisoned in the tower for her claim to the English throne and died in captivity in 1615. Her spirit is said to wander the Queen's house where she was held, her presence often accompanied by the scent of roses. But finally, we have the Eastern State Penitentiary, built on the Quaker-inspired belief in the redemptive power of solitude. It introduced a revolutionary approach to incarceration. The prison was designed to isolate inmates from each other. They would endure prolonged periods of solitary confinement. Both guards and prisoners were forbidden from speaking, and extreme measures were implemented to suppress any form of noise. It sounds like hell. The penitentiary's strict rules often gave way to brutal punishments too. Inmates endured a range of torturous punishments, including ice-cold water baths in the middle of winter, a quote-unquote mad chair designed to cut off circulation to certain extremities, and a dreaded basement cell known as the Hole, where prisoners were subjected to complete and utter darkness. That mixed with the lack of sound, yeah, that sounds not good. With an absence of basic amenities in there as well. A number of people, including visitors and staff, have reported unsettling experiences within the building. Sightings of shadowy figures, the sounds of eerie wails, and even apparitions or faces manifesting on cell walls. And we're kicking off the list with Petak Island Prison in Russia. So this prison is known for its incredibly harsh conditions and isolation from the mainland. Yeah, stuck on an island prison. That's bad. Bad for the prisoners, anyway. Just makes it a little harder to escape. You know, so I guess good for everyone else. This place has a nickname though that would probably send a shiver up your spine if you were going there, and not just because you'd be in Russia. It's often referred to as the Alcatraz of Russia, which is not a compliment. If you refer to something or someone as the Alcatraz of whatever, you are insulting that person or place. Don't do that. Be nice. But the name does fit for this particular location. This island hellhole holds some of the most dangerous criminals in Russia. And they spend 22.5 hours of the day cooped up in their cells. 22 out of 24 hours. That's a fair chunk of the day. Oh, and if prisoners happen to break any of the strict rules in place, they're sent to a small dark room in total isolation for up to 15 days straight. That's just the tip of the iceberg, too. Next up on the list is what is often referred to as the most dangerous prison in the United States, ADX Florence. It was built back in 1994 and is what is known as a supermax prison. The place houses some of the biggest and baddest criminals in the country, ones that pose a severe threat of violence to staff and other inmates and just need extra security, more than you'd get in even a maximum security prison. But how do you get more extreme than maximum security? Maximum means like this is it, you've reached the wall, you're at the max. Apparently you just add super to the title. It's not just maximum, super maximum. One step above that, I guess, would be mega maximum prison, which doesn't exist yet. I imagine that's when we'll start putting people in with actual superpowers. Prisoners here are under watch though 24/7 and spend almost the entirety of their day in single cells. Some prisoners here are even barred from speaking privately with their own lawyers or family members, because I guess that's just how dangerous they are. They could just talk their way out of prison. Next up, we have a political prison camp infamous for its extreme human rights abuses, Camp 22 in North Korea. Not only would you never want to visit this place in case you did something wrong and ended up actually being detained yourself, but it's also in North Korea, so good luck even getting into the country. I mean, yeah, what can I say? It's a prison camp. Only time camp is good in a sentence, I'm learning, is when it has the word summer right before it. Pretty much any other kind of camp is not where you want to be. And based on the little information that's gotten out about this place, it sounds like hell. And remember, this is North Korea, so there's a lot kept under wraps. If the stuff I'm talking about here sounds bad, you know there are things going on that are 10 times worse in there. So a former prison guard actually talked about the state he'd seen some of the prisoners in, and it's pretty horrific. Not sure how much detail we can really get into here, but according to him, about 30% of the prisoners had life-altering deformities due to all the mistreatment. Missing ears, faces covered in cuts and bruises. Many were underfed, just complete. It's just what comes along with living under a totalitarian regime. Next up, we have Attica Correctional Facility. This prison is in Attica, New York, and became famous for the 1971 Attica prison riot. The facility was built in the 30s, and by the 70s, it had become severely overcrowded with harsh living conditions. The breaking point came in September of 1971, when prisoners revolted, protesting against the inhumane treatment by prison staff and generally poor living conditions. The riot lasted for 4 days, and it turned violent. In the end, the New York State Police were called in to regain control. The aftermath was brutal. During the retaking of the prison, law enforcement officers shot both inmates and hostages accidentally, and total 43 people lost their lives. 10 hostages and 33 inmates. Many others were also injured. Attica became a symbol of prison brutality and sparked debates about the treatment of prisoners. And the incident led to some changes in prison policies, but it also exposed deep-rooted issues in the US prison system. It's certainly not as dangerous now as many of the other prisons on this list, but the history of the place has definitely left an impression. Next, we head to Syria to explore Tadmor Prison without actually going there. So, the wonders of the internet. This place is infamous for its brutal treatment of prisoners. Definitely has a grim reputation. Built in the 1960s, it's located in the desert near Palermo. The prison became rather infamous because of how bad its inmates were treated. Political prisoners in particular. There was overcrowding, extreme abuse. In 1980, a horrific event unfolded known as the Tadmor Prison massacre. The Syrian government cracked down on prisoners, resulting in the deaths of hundreds, maybe even thousands. The exact number is still a bit unclear because of the secretive nature of the Syrian regime. A paramilitary force known as the Defense Brigade entered the prison at dawn and attacked prisoners in their cells. After the massacre, the prison continued to be a symbol of terror. In 2001, the Syrian government officially closed Tadmor, but reports suggest that parts of the facility were still in use for detaining political prisoners. It is a notorious French prison known for its overcrowded and harsh conditions. It's a bit of a redundant. I've never heard of overcrowding being a good thing. So from now on, if I say overcrowded, it's bad. It's bad. In straightforward terms, La Santa has gained a reputation for being a tough place. Constructed in the 19th century, it has faced issues related to its aging infrastructure and insufficient space for its inmates. Overcrowding has been persistent, leading to concerns about the well-being of these prisoners. The prison has been criticized for its tough disciplinary measures as well, and reports of violence among inmates is not uncommon. Inmates have sometimes protested against these conditions, drawing attention to the challenges they face inside the facility, but the harsh environment mixed with the psychological toll of incarceration has also led to a number of inmates taking their own lives. Now, efforts have apparently been made to address some of these problems, including renovations and updates to the prison, but I probably wouldn't be adding this to my list of places to check out if I were visiting France. Want to see some dark stuff? Go to the Paris catacombs or something. The dead don't scare me nearly as much as the living. Next up is Carandiru Penitentiary in Brazil. Now, this place actually closed in 2002, but its history of violence and overcrowding made it absolutely infamous. Located in Sao Paulo, it has a dark and notorious history that reached its peak with a very tragic event that became known as the Carandiru Massacre. It was built in 1956. The prison became one of the largest in Latin America, designed to house around 3,000 inmates, but it often held more than double that number. And anytime you have overcrowding on that kind of scale, tension and violence is almost unavoidable. On October 2nd of 1992, a riot erupted. In response, the police were called in to regain control, but the situation very quickly spiraled out of control, resulting in what is now known as the aforementioned Carandiru Massacre. Military police entered the prison, and in the ensuing chaos, 111 inmates lost their lives, most of them unarmed and in their cells. The prison was eventually closed in 2002, and the remaining inmates were transferred to other facilities. Taking the next spot on list is Black Beach in Equatorial Guinea. This is said to be one of Africa's most notorious prisons. Yes, out of the entire continent. That's saying a lot. The prison was built during the Spanish colonial rule in the 1940s. Initially, it mostly held petty criminals, but by 1968, with the independence of the country, it started housing political prisoners as well, many of whom died in the prison. Wonder how. The biggest problem with this place is neglect. Prisoners are often denied basic amenities like food and healthcare. Many prisoners are also violently tormented. And we're gonna finish things off with Urumqi number 3 detention center in Dabancheng, China. This is the largest detention center not only in China but possibly the entire world. If you think some of the inmates numbers I've mentioned so far are a lot, this place dwarfs them all. This detention center holds about 10,000 inmates or more if they were really jammed in there, like most of the prisons on this list. That's just an estimate based on satellite imagery and from what little reporters have seen from the inside. Chinese authorities keep a lot of stuff hush-hush, including the exact number of inmates currently housed there. But the place is 220 acres, twice the size of Vatican City. That sounds like a dystopian sci-fi movie kind of prison. The prison also holds what are referred to as vocational training centers, which have been described by former prisoners as brutal internment camps. And there's a specific group that is being targeted the worst, an ethnic minority in China called the Uyghurs, who are basically being thrust into these camps to do forced labor, which the government, of course, And we're starting off the list with Salisbury Prison in North Carolina. Salisbury Prison was a Confederate prison camp that began operation in 1861. First, the conditions in the prison weren't so bad. I mean, it was still a prison camp, so not an ideal place to spend your time, but not a complete nightmare either. There were roughly 120 Union soldiers housed there. They were fed decently and were given shelter, but that 120 inmates quickly grew to about 10,000 after only a few years. It comes as no surprise that the conditions at the camp severely dipped in quality. There was severe overcrowding. Many of them didn't have proper beds to sleep in. There wasn't enough food to feed everyone. Sanitation was bad. And this all led to the spread of disease and starvation. There was a high percentage of death amongst the prisoners. At number 9, we have Missouri State Penitentiary in Jefferson City, Missouri. This prison operated between 1836 and 2004, and for a long time it was the oldest operating prison west of the Mississippi River. Because of some of the gruesome stuff that went on here, this prison garnered quite the reputation of becoming known as the bloodiest 47 acres in America. The building still stands today, and it's said to be haunted by the former inmates who lost their lives within its walls. In the early days of the prison, neglect and mistreatment by guards was commonplace. Inmates were whipped, sometimes for no reason at all, as well as enduring far harsher forms of torture. A number of executions took place within the prison, and violent riots resulted in the loss of life on more than one occasion. One of the most infamous prisoners at Missouri State Pen was James Earl Ray, who managed to escape from the prison by hiding in a box used to ship bread. And just a year after making his escape, he would shoot down Martin Luther King. Next on the list is the Wyoming Territorial Prison. Beginning operation in 1873, this prison started off hot with a horrible fire within that very same year. Great start. Within only a few years, the prison became overcrowded. This meant poor conditions for the inmates and an increase in violence. Things leveled out, though, by the 1880s. Conditions were still harsh. However, the prisoners had to remain silent at all times. They were referred to simply as their designated number, and endured harsh physical and psychological punishment for breaking the rules. The most famous prisoner here was Butch Cassidy, the notorious train and bank robber and leader of the gang known as the Wild Bunch in the Old West. Today, there are a number of ghosts said to haunt the building, which now stands as a historical site, including that of a former cigar maker named Julius Greenwald. Greenwald had landed himself in prison after shooting his wife, having discovered her working in a brothel. But he was in the brothel, so he wasn't going there to see his wife. A little hypocritical, if I might say. Greenwald died while serving time at the prison, and his spirit is said to still be trapped within the building. Some visitors claim to smell a faint aroma of cigars wafting through the empty halls. Number 5, Sing Sing Correctional Facility in New York. The first prison on the list that's actually still in operation. The land for the prison was purchased in 1825 in Mount Pleasant on the banks of the Hudson River. 100 inmates were transferred from Auburn Prison to this piece of land where they would begin construction on their new home. It was constructed from marble from a nearby quarry, and the prison operated using the Auburn system, meaning prisoners were forced to remain silent at all times and worked through the day performing intense physical labor. If rules were broken, harsh physical punishment would be inflicted on the inmates. And Sing Sing Prison became famous for its death row, housing the infamous death house where between 1891 and 1963, 614 executions took place with the electric chair. Things are definitely a lot better for the prison nowadays, though. Still a prison, so I wouldn't want to go, but at least they're allowed to talk now. Next up on the list is San Quentin State Prison. Beginning operation in 1854, this was and still is one of the most dangerous prisons in the United States. It houses the only death row in the state of California. Executions used to be carried out through the gas chamber, but are now done through lethal injection. During During its early years, San Quentin housed prisoners in deplorable conditions. With overcrowding and unsanitary facilities, the prison garnered a reputation for brutality, with reports of mistreatment, inmate violence, and harsh discipline. And the place has held some of the most notorious inmates in American history, like Charles Manson, and riots and violent incidents have erupted over the course of its operation. In at number 3, we have the West Virginia Penitentiary in Moundsville, West Virginia. With such a long and dark history, this place is known as one of the most haunted former prisons in the United States. Opening its doors in 1876, the prison operated for over a century before closing in 1995. Throughout its many years of operation, the penitentiary saw countless violent incidents, including riots and deadly clashes amongst inmates. The conditions were poor, often cramped and unsanitary, and the prison's most infamous feature was its use of the electric chair for executions, given the nickname Old Sparky, as well as hangings in its earlier days, which were often made public. With all the violence and death that took place within this ominous Gothic-style building during its operation, there are a number of reports of paranormal activity that have emerged over the years. The building still stands today and now has ghost tours with visitors and investigators reporting unsettling experiences during their visits. In at second place, we have Alcatraz. I'd put it at number 1, but this is a pretty heavily discussed haunted location, so I just thought that would be too obvious. I'm very cool because I'm a contrarian. Alcatraz, a rocky island located in San Francisco Bay, was first used for military purposes in the 1850s, housing soldiers and acting as a defensive stronghold. In 1934, it transitioned into a high-security prison, housing notorious criminals like Al Capone and George Machine Gun Kelly. Inmates here endured solitary confinement, demanding labor, and harsh punishment. Alcatraz gained a reputation for being an inescapable prison because of its isolated location and the frigid waters that surrounded it. Despite that though, there are several famous escape attempts from this prison, more so than most prisons to be honest, so I think they're kind of overcompensating with that. Over the years, a total of 14 escape attempts were made, with the 1962 attempt by Frank Morris and the Anglin brothers being probably the most famous. The escapees disappeared and were never found, and some say they actually may have made it to shore and were able to start a new life in secret. Others believe they might have drowned. Every other escape has been unsuccessful though, with prisoners being shot by guards while attempting to escape or just being caught before even making it that far. One prisoner in 1962, John Paul Scott, actually did manage to make it ashore, but he suffered from hypothermia and police found him unconscious. The building now stands as a museum, said to be haunted by the spirits of its former inmates. Visitors and staff claim to have experienced strange phenomena like hearing whispers in empty cells to even seeing full-on apparitions.
Coming in at number 10 is Salt Pit, Afghanistan. Salt Pit is a secret CIA-run prison in Afghanistan. It is one of the several prisons that were set up by the CIA after the September attack in New York and was intended to hold people suspected of having links with radical criminals. The torment of prisoners happened every day in Salt Pit, and prisoners were often subjected to inhumane punishments and conditions, including mock executions. Its cells are small and without windows or toilets, and due to this, the prisoners have to relieve themselves in a bucket. Inmates are also stripped naked and made to sleep on cold concrete floors. CIA operatives always kept loud music playing as a form of psychological torture. Now, Dr. Garrett Bahir, who was held at the prison for 6 months, revealed that the CIA interrogators tied him to a chair and sat on his stomach. Another Gul Raham, who later died in custody and remains the only verified death at the prison, experienced more violent punishment. He was stripped naked, his hands chained over his head while he was repeatedly beaten and drenched with buckets of water. Gul died of hypothermia on the morning of November 20th, 2002, and the CIA did not return his body to his family or inform them of his. Now, beginning in April 2021 until the final withdrawal of US troops from Afghanistan, large sections of the Salt Pit were demolished by the departing personnel before the Taliban gained control of the site. Number 9. Camp 7, Guantanamo Bay. Camp 7 was built in a hidden location away from the main prison. Camp 7 was so carefully hidden that no one knew of its existence for 2 years after it opened in 2006. Now, Camp 7 was home to 15 prisoners the CIA considered high-value detainees. One was Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, who was seen as the mastermind of the September attack. The CIA has been accused of mistreating the prisoners, and when its existence was revealed, journalists were not allowed to visit. The Red Cross was allowed in on the condition that it never publicly speak about what it saw. One of its inmates, Razmi bin al-Shia, complained that his cell always vibrated and made some strange noises. Now, the US military denied all accusations of psychological torture and claimed he was just hearing things, but in 2014 the Pentagon confessed that he was hearing real noises, but said it was the result of the prison falling apart. Number 8. Resort, North Korea. Inmates at the resort aren't radical criminals, but blacklisted relatives and officials of the North Korean oligarchy. It's located just 30 miles away from the Chinese border, and the resort is believed to hold up around 1,000 people. It has so many inmates because prisoners will often move in with their families. Now, while heavily guarded, it does not look like a prison, but more like a small town. Prisoners do not try to escape since the living conditions aren't bad. They don't perform any hard labor or endure any additional punishment and get free cooked meals every day. Kim Sung-ae is one of the people suspected of being held at the resort. She used to be the second wife of the late president Kim Il-sung. Another suspected prisoner is the aunt of the current president Kim Jong-un. She is the wife of Jang Song-taek, who was taken to the resort after her husband was executed in December 2013. But for North Korea, these conditions seem a little too good to me. Number 7. Cat's Eye, Thailand. Cat's Eye was a secret CIA prison in Thailand, and it could still be active today since no one knows its precise location. Everyone agrees that it is in Thailand, and even though the CIA and Thai government deny its existence. Cat's Eye was exposed in a 2014 US Senate report in which its location was listed as country redacted. Now, the prison was hurriedly set up in 2002 to hold Abdul Zuba, who was suspected to be one of bin Laden's henchmen. Abdul was picked up in Pakistan in March 2002, and the CIA was confused on where to keep him. They wanted a place far away from US jurisdiction and the Red Cross, so they built Cat's Eye. For several months, he was the only inmate held there, and he lived inside a box that was no bigger than a coffin and was continuously waterboarded until he fainted. The CIA used him to test out several of their enhanced interrogation techniques. Cat's Eye's second prisoner was Abd al-Rahim al-Narshi, who arrived there in November 2002. Both prisoners were frequently slapped, stripped, deprived of sleep. Cat's Eye was reportedly shut down in December 2002 after the CIA moved the inmates to another black site in Poland, but who knows if they're secretly still active today. Number 6. Tamara Interrogation Center, Morocco. The Tamara Interrogation Center was a secret prison jointly operated by the CIA and the Moroccan government. The facility originally opened as a CIA-run secret interrogation center following the September 11th attacks. However, the CIA soon turned it into a prison, but was more interested in detaining political prisoners. Zakaria Momi, a French-Moroccan citizen who was held there for 4 days for political reasons, said his Moroccan interrogators told him he slaughterhouse and that he would leave in pieces. Another, Usama Butar, who fought with the Bosnia-based Islamist Matilla group in the 1990s and in 2003, said the Moroccans told him that they were torturing him because the Americans told them to. Now, a report by the US Senate revealed that the CIA knew Morocco was torturing prisoners at the facility. The CIA complained to the Moroccan intelligence agency, but the complaint only destroyed the relationship between the CIA and the Moroccan government. The CIA also planned on abandoning the Terama site for another prison, but later changed its mind. Now, on the other hand, Morocco denies all accusations of torture, but I think they're both guilty. Number 5. Camp Lenamir, Djibouti. Let me start off by saying that Djibouti is a small country. Now, the strategic location of the small nation is the reason the US established a military base on its soil. From the base called Camp Lenamir, the US launched drone strikes against targets in Somalia and Yemen. There are also unconfirmed claims that the CIA operates a secret prison at the base. The US Congress reportedly has information about the existence of the facility but has refused to declassify it. Mohammed Abdullah Sahil said, was one of the inmates supposedly held in the prison. He said he was tormented there before he was transferred to another black site in Afghanistan, where he was also mistreated. Mahdi Hashi, another supposed former prisoner, said he was taken to the prison after he was kidnapped by the CIA agents in Somalia. He claimed he was arrested because he refused to spy for British intelligence. Number 4. Gay prisons, Chechnya. Chechnya is a Muslim-majority autonomous region of Russia. They have their own head of state, Razman Kadyrov, who Russia leaves to do as he wishes. Kadyrov has been accused of running secret prisons where gay men are mistreated so badly that they end up dying. Russia and Chechnya do not tolerate gay people, and while Russia has introduced laws to keep gay people in line, Chechnya prefers abducting them and keeping them in secret detention centers. Now, some journalists who reported the existence of the secret prison in Chechnya have been found dead under suspicious circumstance. Novaya Gazeta, the first paper to report the kidnappings, detentions, and deaths, has seen at least 6 of its journalists die. Now, some of its living journalists are still being threatened, and others have even fled the country. Number 3. Black jails, China. The black jails are independent secret prisons illegally operated by various Chinese provinces and local government. Because of the governmental structure in China, citizens are expected to report any grievance to their local and provincial governments. Now, if they do not get justice, they are allowed to report to the central government at Beijing. Now, the central government itself uses the number of reports it receives to determine the effectiveness of the local and provincial government. Now, to avoid getting into Beijing's black books, the local and provincial governments employed over 10,000 people to hunt, kidnap, detain, and torture citizens who travel to Beijing to make reports. The prisons are usually unoccupied homes, psychiatric wards, and guest house. In 2009, it was suspected that the provinces operated 73 black jails inside Beijing. The central government initially denied the existence of black jails, but later confirmed that they were real. Number 2. Penny Lane, Guantanamo Bay. Penny Lane was another secret prison at Guantanamo Bay. Opened in 2003, the prisoners held there enjoyed a life of luxury. They lived in cottages complete with a very comfortable bed, kitchen, patio, shower, and television. And they could also request for additional luxuries. The fact that the inmates held in Penny Lane enjoyed a life of luxury shouldn't be very surprising, as the place was exclusively reserved for confirmed radical criminals undergoing training as double agents. After their training, they were released and allowed to return to their cells, where they sent inside information back to the CIA. Now, this information was used to prepare drone strikes against targets of interest. In exchange, the CIA gave the criminals millions of dollars in payment. The program was not a total success though, as some of the criminals rejoined their cells and never reported back to the CIA. Now, some also became unwillingly double agents after the CIA threatened to harm their families. Due to all of this, the double agent program ended in 2006. Papa II, India. In the 1990s, Indian military and local guerrillas clashed in the Kashmir region of the country, and the soldiers' methods of finding an enemy could get pretty brutal. The ID parade involved rounding up the boys and men of the area and showing them one by one to masked informers. Whoever the informer pointed at was taken away, where they were often taken to an interrogation center, where they were tormented or had their lives ended without much delay. Now, if they were really unlucky, they were taken to the Papa II prison camp, which was a place you'd rarely walk away from. Now, a 19-year-old Muslim student named Mazruf Sultan is one of the lucky people to survive Papa II. Now, after he was picked out in an ID parade for reasons he did not know, he was beaten up, blindfolded, and taken away for interrogation. Now, despite his instance that he was innocent, Sultan was stripped naked, beat up so badly that several of his bones broke. After that, they took the poor, nude, broken young man and threw him in a cell of the infamous Papa II, which was on an old estate of a local ruler. Sultan's time in Papa II was short, but that didn't make it any less painful. The guards threw cold water at him, attached metal rings on his genitals and both his feet, and administered electric shock. Finally, he was taken away to a nearby flood channel where a group of soldiers shot several times. Miraculously, he survived, but he was paralyzed for the rest of his life. Though the soldiers of the India's border security force used the facility to interrogate and end the lives of thousands of people, it was actually just one of 7 similar centers in the region.
Starting off in our number 10 spot, we have Moundsville Penitentiary. The eerie echo of evil emanates from the Moundsville Penitentiary in West Virginia, an institution notorious for its savage treatment of inmates. With hundreds of of deaths recorded, many a grim tale cling to its damp walls. The most chilling among these is the quote-unquote shadow man, a phantom silhouette that roams the prison grounds. Patrons claim to have seen this spectral figure, believed to embody the heinous deeds committed within the penitentiary, darting across the walls before dissolving into thin air. As if this wasn't enough, spine-tingling laughter and spectral whispers resonate through the deserted corridors, a disconcerting reminder of the prison's gruesome past. All in all, visiting this prison is truly a haunting experience, and it's definitely not recommended. In our number 9 spot today, we have the Kingston Penitentiary. The Kingston Penitentiary in Canada is the country's oldest prison, and it bristles with horrifying tales. The secret of this place lies in its inhumane past, where it was notorious for its cruel and unusual punishments. Aside from these stories of savage punishments, however, the penitentiary's most alarming secret lies in the tragic story of George Hewell, an inmate killed by his cellmates. According to legend, Hewell's spirit is trapped within the institution's chilling stone confines, his spectral presence witnessed around his former cell. This eerie manifestation only intensifies the sense of dread pervading this historic prison. Any way you spin it, this prison is definitely not suitable for your next tourist vacation. In our number 8 spot today, we have Petak Prison. The Petak Prison in Indonesia, infamous for wartime torment, holds a blood-curdling secret. This gruesome establishment is said to house a well where the bodies of those who faced unseen horrors at the prison were discarded. It's believed that the spirits of the tormented rise under the cloak of darkness, seeking retribution for their gruesome fate, and I have to say, could anyone blame them? There are so many stories of horrifying treatment, it's no wonder these tales go hand in hand with the tales of terrifying hauntings. Scary stories of spectral soldiers and the haunted faces of the deceased give the prison an ambiance that sends shivers down the spine of even the most intrepid explorer. In our number 6 spot today, we have the Old Idaho Penitentiary. The Old Idaho Penitentiary, operational from 1872 to 1973, is steeped in a very dark past. The haunted secret in this one lies in the most unlikely of places, however, the prison's rose garden. Its rose garden holds a chilling secret, and it all starts with the garden being tended to by inmates on good behavior. This is all fine and well, and actually sounds like a moderately nice time, all things considered, but things take a very dark turn when you learn that this spot was also where several convicts were executed by hanging. Now, this has of course led to strange phenomena being reported around the rose garden, with spectral figures and ghostly faces appearing among the flowers. A sensation of despair and sorrow often overcomes visitors, and it is a chilling reminder of the lives cut short on that very spot. In our number 5 spot today, we have Fremantle Prison. In the land down under, amidst the serene, picturesque landscapes and crazy huge spiders, lies a monument to humanity's dark side, Fremantle Prison. Once a fortress for punishment, this stark sandstone monolith houses a terrifying secret deep within its dark, convoluted tunnels. The labyrinth beneath Fremantle was forged by the hands of the very inmates it imprisoned, with the chilling corridors bearing testament to the sweat, tears, and desperation of those who chiseled them from the hard, unyielding earth. These tight, suffocating passageways, eerily lit by occasional slivers of dim light, were the site of countless tragedies. Numerous prisoners met their untimely end within this grim maze, either through unfortunate accidents or desperate acts of self-destruction. However, it seems their spirits are far from being at peace. Today, the chilling echoes of the inmates' despair reverberate through the tunnels. Unseen figures cast elusive, phantom shadows, their eerie presence sensed more often than seen, while an inexplicable chill permeates the air. I gotta say, haunted tunnels underneath an abandoned prison. It truly does not get more creepy than that. In our number 4 spot today, we have La Santé Prison. In the vibrant center of Paris, amidst the iconic landmarks and bustling cafes, stands an imposing structure with a sinister legacy. La Santé Prison. This foreboding edifice harbors a disturbing secret that makes its shadowy corners and dimly lit halls even more chilling. Its ghostly denizen is none other than the figure of a former warden, ominously dubbed with a nickname I can't even say here on YouTube, but what I will say is the name was inspired by his reign as warden, during which the prison witnessed an alarming surge in inmates taking their own lives, a morbid correlation that cemented his place in the prison's dreadful lore. Even now, his spectral presence is palpable, with visitors reporting the phantom echoes of his heavy footsteps clanging down the corridors and his whispers rustling like the chilling wind. These eerie manifestations serve as a stark reminder of the prison's horrifying past, ensuring that its gruesome legacy is never forgotten, but instead hauntingly alive.
And we're starting off this list with the Potawatomi County Jail located in Council Bluffs, Iowa. It was built in 1885 and is known as the squirrel cage, or at least it used to be, due to its unique design. Instead of traditional cells, the jail featured a rotating circular cage. The design was kind of revolutionary for the time. It was intended to increase security and allow for better surveillance of the inmates, but was ultimately discontinued due to its impracticality. Some prisoners were also severely harmed in the rotating contraption. So basically there was these cylindrical cages that prisoners' cells were located in. They each had one opening, and the jailer turned this crank and the cell would rotate to either face the opening or the enclosed part of the cage. It was pretty dangerous, and a lot of prisoners lost limbs. So yeah, not a place you would have wanted to end up in. Despite being decommissioned in 1969, many people believe that this county jail is haunted. The former jail was also featured in Ghost Adventures, so if you want to learn more about it, you can check that episode out. At number 9, we have the Orleans Parish Prison. Orleans Parish Prison, located in New Orleans, Louisiana, is regarded as one of the worst prisons in the United States and was one of the most heavily impacted facilities during Hurricane Katrina in 2005. The prison has a violent reputation and has been scrutinized for being understaffed, filthy. Probably the most infamous incident at the prison, though, took place during Hurricane Katrina. Roughly 650 prisoners were left behind in the prison after the hurricane hit, and the conditions inside quickly deteriorated. Of course, as the floodwaters rose and power was lost, many inmates were left without food, water, basic necessities, and some were forced to drink from toilets in order to survive. It's believed that over 500 prisoners lost their lives. The State Correctional Institution, also known as Western Penitentiary in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. This former prison has been left abandoned since 2017 and is known for a particularly dark incident that took place in 1987. A fire broke out in one of the prison's cell blocks, causing significant damage and endangering the lives of inmates and staff. That's what fire does. It's dangerous. It was later revealed, though, that the fire had been deliberately started by a group of guards in response to a protest by inmates. The incident happened when a group of inmates began protesting poor conditions and mistreatment at the facility, including overcrowding and limited access to basic necessities. In response, a group of guards reportedly entered the cell block and set fire to a pile of garbage, causing the blaze to quickly spread throughout the area. Inmates were left trapped in their cells, and smoke and flames engulfed the block. Many suffered smoke inhalation and other injuries as a result. Nevada State Prison. This former prison started operation in 1862 and has been left abandoned since 2012. Located in Carson City, Nevada State Prison was known for its harsh conditions, numerous executions, and some of its infamous inmates. Prison's long history has this association with death and despair, and it's led a lot of people to believe it could be haunted. Numerous reports of paranormal activity have been documented by visitors and employees of the prison. Strange sounds, eerie voices, and unexplained footsteps have all been discussed, particularly in the cell blocks, the execution chamber. Visitors have also reported feeling a sense of unease or, being watched by mysterious eyes. And some have even claimed to have seen apparitions of former inmates or guards. One of the most famous ghosts believed to haunt the prison is that of a former inmate who was executed by hanging in the 19th century. Many visitors have also reported seeing his ghost in the execution chamber or hearing his disembodied voice. Other reported hauntings include a guard who was murdered by inmates in the 1950s. The prison's eerie reputation has drawn attention from a lot of ghost hunters and paranormal enthusiasts like Jack Baggins himself and his Ghost Adventures crew. Next up, we have the Old Essex County Jail. The Old Essex County Jail, located in Newark, New Jersey, was known for its harsh conditions and, again, brutal treatment of inmates. Today, many people believe that the jail is haunted by the spirits of those who died within the walls due to the extreme conditions and inhumane treatment of the former inmates. One of the main reasons why the Old Essex County Jail is considered haunted is the high number of deaths that occurred. The jail's overcrowded conditions, poor sanitation, and lack of medical care led to numerous outbreaks of disease, which claimed the lives of many inmates. Additionally, the jail was the site of several violent incidents. Trauma and, pain that happened within these walls, some say kind of left an imprint on the jail, leading to the supposed paranormal activity. And another factor that contributes to the possible haunting is the evidence of ghostly activity. If you want to call it evidence, it's people saying they've seen or heard things. Visitors and staff have reported hearing strange noises, whispers, all your classics. Some have even seen full-bodied apparitions, including the ghost of a former inmate who is said to have hung himself within his cell. Others have experienced sudden drops in temperature or seen unexplained orbs of light. I always find orbs kind of boring, but I don't know, that's just me. I want to see like a ghost, The point is, this site is now abandoned and technically prohibited, so enter at your own risk. Next up, we have another Australian prison, the Old Melbourne Gaol. This former prison located in Melbourne, Australia, was operational from 1845 until 1924. The prison is famous for its grim history, with over 130 prisoners executed on the gallows during its operation. And today, the prison is open to the public as a museum with guided tours offering visitors a glimpse into the lives of the prisoners who were incarcerated. But when it was operational as a prison, again, you would have been warned never to go near it. It housed some of Australia's most notorious criminals and was known for its inhumane conditions. Big surprise, surprise. Prisoners' cells were tiny and overcrowded, with up to 4 inmates crammed into a single cell. The prisoners were forced to sleep on hard wooden planks without any bedding. Sanitation was almost non-existent too, with only a few communal toilets available for hundreds of prisoners. The cells were rarely cleaned, and inmates were often left to live in filth, which resulted in the spread of disease and infection. And in terms of punishment, you had solitary confinement, flogging, or even hanging for the most serious of crimes. The gallows at the prison saw the execution of over 130 prisoners, making it one of the most notorious places of execution in Australian history, which is also why it's said to be one of the most haunted prisoners in Australia. The Atlanta Prison Farm is a former correctional facility located in Atlanta, Georgia. It's known for its tough conditions and forced labor practices. Today, the prison is abandoned, and many people believe it to be haunted. One of the most commonly reported paranormal occurrences at the Atlanta Prison Farm is the apparition of a former prisoner who was killed during a failed escape attempt. Visitors are reported seeing the ghostly figure of a man running through the prison's corridors before disappearing into the thin air. Some visitors to the prison have reported feeling a sense of unease or being touched again by people that aren't really there. There have also been reports of mysterious orbs of light. I'm not too enthused about that, but people are really obsessed with orbs. There's orb enthusiasts out there. Figures are also seen appearing in photographs taken inside the prison. Despite the supposed paranormal activity at the prison, the Atlanta Prison Farm remains a popular destination for ghost hunters and urban explorers looking to experience the haunted history firsthand. I'd actually like to go. I'd check it. I've never been to an abandoned, supposedly haunted place before, but, no one wants to go. Anyone want to go with me? Let me know in the comments. Probably won't happen, but, Garcia Moreno Prison, located in Quito, Ecuador, was once home to some of the most notorious criminals in the country's history. It was also violent and overcrowded, not a place I would have ever wanted to visit. Today, Garcia Moreno is well known for its haunted reputation. Many visitors and locals believe that the abandoned prison is haunted by the spirits of former inmates who suffered and died there. Some of the most commonly reported paranormal activity includes strange, weird noises, voices, they're disembodied, and, just this eerie feeling of being watched. Visitors have also reported seeing ghostly figures and shadows moving throughout the prison, and the harsh living conditions, frequent outbreaks of violence, and numerous deaths that occurred within the prison are believed to have left a lingering presence of unrest and suffering. And it's interesting with this one too, because apparently it's abandoned, but a lot of the stuff the prisoners left behind are still there. It almost looks like people just suddenly disappeared. Despite being closed for several years, Garcia Moreno Prison continues to draw visitors who are interested in its macabre history and a chance to experience paranormal. The Shepton Mallet Prison. So we're going to be talking a lot about brutal prisons that you would have been warned not to visit before they were finally shut down. So I figured I'd start things off with a prison that is no longer operational, but you may still not want to visit for another reason. Ghosts. Located in Somerset, England, Shepton Mallet is known as one of the most haunted prisons in the world and has a long storied history. It had completed construction in 1910 and was fully operational until 1990 and had changed hands several times over the course of its operation. It was a military prison in both British and American hands during World War II and then went back to British hands after that. The walls of this historic building are said to house the tortured spirits that were once inmates of the prison, where countless hangings took place. There are ghost tours now. If you want to go at your own risk. Alright, so this is a German word. In German, I don't speak it, so this might come out a little janky. Hohenschönhausen Prison is a former Stasi prison located in Berlin, Germany. It was originally built in 1945, but in 1951, the Soviet secret police transferred control of the facility to the Eastern German Ministry of State Security, commonly known as the Stasi. Used it as a prison for opponents of the regime. The prison just had terrible living conditions, and the inmates were treated, of course, horribly, as you could probably imagine. They were subjected to physical violence, forced labor, but psychological torture was the main method used here. They would threaten to harm inmates' families. Sleep deprivation was also big. They were held in cramped cells without windows and were often denied food and medical treatment. Many inmates were interrogated for weeks or months on end, often resulting in false confessions. Despite the human rights abuses in the prison, the facility remained hidden from the public for many years. It was located in a restricted area, so this is one you definitely wouldn't be visiting because there's a good chance you wouldn't have even known it existed. Inmates were not allowed to communicate with the outside world and were often held in solitary confinement to prevent them from sharing information about their treatment.